Hi, it's Terry Riddock from the Property Investment Channel. You have decided you want to turn over some tenants, but you have also decided you do not want to get into trouble. So you should hire a paralegal. Luckily for you, I've got one here with me right now. All right, so Beta, how are you?
I'm well, Terry. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you again for doing this. It's a real pleasure to have you. So, can you tell folks who are you?
Well, my name is Beta DeLisi. I'm a licensed paralegal with a background in real estate. I have a firm and it's called Stonegate Legal Services. Our firm provides support to realtors, landlords, and investors throughout the province of Ontario. We only do one type of law, that's landlord and tenant law, and that's because of our real estate background.
Right, that's right, because you were a real estate broker before paralegal, or at the same time at the beginning?
Well, at the same time in the beginning, and then kind of shifted. I don't sell real estate anymore.
Right. Okay. So today we want to be talking in the first part about tenant turnover. So it's a big topic. Landlords love tenant turnovers. Buyers are looking for the prospect of tenant turnovers. So the first one, cash for keys. What is it? How does it work?
So cash, I'm a huge fan of cash for keys. Cash for keys, Terry, is basically offering a buyout to the tenant in exchange for a termination of tenancy. That buyout could be anything. It could be 5,000, 10,000, 15,000. It could be a forgiveness of $20,000 of rent arrears, whatever. Something in exchange for a termination of tenancy. Now, I highly recommend for a cash for keys to be done prior to the property being listed on the market. And that's basically to avoid any issues with access to the property, showing times, closing, staging, open houses, photos and videos, all the challenges that agents and seller landlords face when they're trying to sell a tenanted property.
Okay, so a couple quick little things. You had noted the 5,000 or forgiveness of rent and arrears. So I've done a handful of these over the past number of years, and I have noticed that price. And again, it depends on the unit, who the tenant is, what's going on. But I have noticed that price that tenants are asking really kind of creeping up. So what's the range that you're seeing for landlords?
So the way we justify any cash for keys proposal is that we need to provide the tenant with the tools that they need in order for them to find another property. So what are the tools? The tools are first month's rent, last month's rent, money for moving costs, and incidentals. Without those three things, they can't move. And if they can't move, guess what, Terry? They become your problem because it's going to make it difficult for you or challenging for you to sell that property.
Right.
So, but they can ask for more, right? They
Mhm.
can ask for whatever. Cash for keys is a legal settlement in exchange for termination.
Okay, so I'm about to sell my property. I've got some tenants that are interested in the cash for keys, and let's pretend it's $10,000. Do I pay them now? Do I pay them when they move out? How do you recommend that works?
So that depends on what is in your agreement because any cash for keys offering should be accompanied by terms of settlement and the agreement to end the tenancy. Now, just like an agreement of purchase and sale, we want to basically touch on the elements of contract law. So anytime there's an offer, there's an acceptance, there's some amount of consideration given. In real estate, you give a deposit. Well, in these cases, I always recommend to give half or some money upfront to the tenant so they can use that to secure another property. And then, of course, the balance on closing.
Okay, so once they've moved out, here's half. I've got my keys back, but in the meantime, you need to come up with first and last and whatever else. And we're going to give you some right at the beginning. Here's a question for you, though. I can think of one instance where I was tangentially involved with this, if that's the word, where the tenant spent the money and didn't have the means to move out. So what happens if you've given them half, you're prepared to give the other half, it's the first of the month, they're supposed to be out and they're not out. What do you do at that point?
Well, remember, what you're paying the tenant for, what you're compensating them for is for termination of tenancy. That those two documents are filed with the landlord and tenant board. When they're filed with the board will issue an eviction order without a hearing. It'll
Okay.
probably take 3 to 6 weeks to receive that order. Once you receive that, then you're enforcing it. Remember, it all comes back to what's in your terms of settlement, because there should be a clause in your terms of settlement that says something along the lines of, if the tenant doesn't leave for whatever reason, the landlord will pursue an eviction and basically deduct costs from the balance of the compensation.
Okay. Now
Make sense?
you're touching on that second document. So 90 90 100% of the landlords who do this themselves get the tenant to sign an N1 and that's it. What is this second document?
You're referring to the N11,
Sorry,
correct?
the N11, correct.
Yeah. The second document is terms of settlement, kind of like the rules of the game, what we agree on.
Can I write that or do I need you?
Well, you always have to have a legal representative write that, because there are certain clauses that you need to include in terms of settlement, like a full and final release clause that says that we can't come after each other after the termination date for whatever reason. You, as a tenant, can't come after me for any issues, and I can't come after you for any issues. Everyone, all parties are walking away with clean hands.
Okay. And that's a reason why we're hiring a paralegal and not doing this ourselves,
You
correct?
got it. You got it.
Right.
It'll save you a lot of aggravation if you hire a pro.
Okay. Is there anything else that you want to add? Some subtleties to the cash for keys?
Well, I highly recommend a cash for keys be done prior to listing the property.
Right.
Right? And that's because you avoid a lot of headaches, a lot of issues surrounding access to the property. The seller landlord can do whatever they want. They can stage the property. You can take pictures. You can do videos. You can hold in person open houses. You're not going to have issues with vacant possession because the property is already vacant.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. If you can do it,
Yeah.
absolutely do
Yeah.
it. Okay, so the next popular vehicle for tenant turnover is significant construction. How does this work?
Let's talk about that. Actually, there's actually a new Bill 97, that's going to be coming into effect. It's going to be proclaimed soon. And this includes recent amendments to the Residential Tenancies Act when it comes to notices for no fault evictions, like the N12 notice for the landlord or purchaser's own use, or the N13 notice for extensive renovations, conversions, and demolition. And this actually speaks to an increase in fines. So
Mm.
when this Bill 97 passes, there will be an increase in fines to landlords, small landlords, up to $100,000, and corporations up to $500,000.
Good
So
Lord.
basically, what the board is trying to crack down on, Terry, is bad faith evictions when it comes to the N12 and the N13. Lately we're experiencing a rise in the extensive renovation
Mhm.
applications, and most landlords, I don't think they understand what extensive renovations are. Extensive renovations are renovations so extensive that they cannot be done while the tenant is occupying the property.
Okay.
This
So
doesn't include
examples of that are
Yeah, this does not include painting
right.
or changing the floors, because you can shuffle around. This does include, however, changing the pipes, because you're going to have to go through the walls. This does include pulling out the plumbing, because that means you can't use your washroom.
Mhm.
This includes, removal of asbestos, because you can't remove asbestos while somebody's living in the unit. However, the twist, Terry, is that the tenant has to be allowed back into the property after completion of the renovations for the same amount of rent that they were paying.
So I've got
Well,
a question about that. So I've significantly improved the property. Let's pretend that the tenant was responsible for hydro heating, HVAC, water and sewer, and I've made this a lot cheaper and more efficient for them. Can I recoup some of that money?
the only way you can recoup any money is if you add an amenity. if you add a dishwasher, if you add a washer and dryer to the unit, that justifies your request. But even then, even by adding an amenity, your tenant still has to agree.
Right.
It has to be a reasonable increase. You can't add a dishwasher, Terry, and say, I'm going to charge you an extra $500.
You can't?
No, you can't.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah,
Well, I'll
pretty
tell my wife that plans out. Okay.
sure.
So walk me through the process. I've and we are going through this right now actually with a gentleman who's got a fourplex. So he's going to be closing on that shortly. And again, the plumbing is cast, galvanized. The wiring was probably done, I don't know, 60s, 70s type thing. The HVAC systems are just not suitable for the building. The tenants with the previous owner are complaining. So he's going to want to go through, and there are particularly two units that are just going to need to be gutted. What's the process? How does this work?
Well, the process is firstly, I would ask, what is the scope of work? What needs to be
Down to
done?
the studs.
Down to the studs. And I call it as the test to whether or not you choose it's a renovation or a demolition. Are the four exterior walls of the property, are they going to exist?
Absolutely. Yes. Yep.
Okay. Are you changing the front door of the rental unit where it is?
No.
No. So it is considered a renovation
Okay.
because a demolition is where you stand in front of the structure and the structure no longer exists,
Right.
meaning the four outer walls do not exist.
Yeah, so this is not a demolition. This is, I mean, it's same number of bedrooms, same number of bathrooms, kitchens, layout is going to be the exact same thing. But when I say gutted, I mean the kitchen is from, I don't know, the 40s and
It's a renovation.
yeah, so it's a complete renovation. So he wants to go in and he wants to do these renovations. And the reason why I bring this up, Vita, is that there is a vacant unit in there that's going to be done. So he wants to do two other units at the same time that just makes sense.
Right.
So
So the
how does he go about getting the tenants out so he can do this work? What's the process?
keys, cash for keys.
Yeah.
Cash for keys. Because if he serves the notice,
Yes.
he's okay. So let's say he serves notice. That N13 notice has a 120-day termination period, meaning that he has to provide the tenant with 120 days notice.
Okay.
Then he's got to fulfill requirements of that notice, which is compensation, and then he's got to file it with the landlord and tenant board and proceed through the route of the board to end the tenancy. If the tenant decides, hey, I'm not leaving, I'm going to contest it. Now, the tenant has the right of first refusal, meaning that they have to provide in writing to the landlord um, a letter or something in writing saying, hey, landlord Terry, I'm coming back after your renovations. Here's my address that I'm moving to. Please keep me updated with when the renovations are going to be completed.
Okay, so I'm going to stop you right there. So this person says to the tenant, look, I'm doing renovations in this unit. I also want to do them in your units because the plumbing's bad. It's just you won't be able to stay here while we're doing this work. Here's the N13, correct?
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. The tenant will or will not accept that. Let us assume that they're quite keen to have
Yeah.
the unit done. Fine. Or they're going on they're going to Mexico for 6 months. Who cares?
Yeah.
At that point, the tenant must tell the landlord in writing, this is my contact information. I intend to move back. Correct?
Correct. Correct.
Now, here's the question. What happens if the tenant does not do that? They move out, the work's done, and they come knocking on the door saying, hey, wait a second. I actually want to move back in here. And it's the first time they've contacted the landlord since they moved out.
Well, the law says that they have to provide that notice before the termination date. So if they don't,
Sorry,
then the
and that's the
landlord,
120 days,
you
correct?
got it. You
Yeah,
got it.
sorry to
Got
interrupt.
it.
Yep.
If they don't, then the landlord is safe to assume that the tenant is not coming back.
Okay.
Right?
Now, how we stay out of trouble. Some landlords, none of my clients and none of your clients, will go, look, that unit is paying 50 cents on the dollar. They're not going to take the cash for keys. They're not leaving. I'm coming in and I'm going to renovate the place. and they drag their feet for 6 months. The tenant says, you know, and it's clearly fraudulent just to get them gone. What talk to me about that? What did you say it was $100,000?
Yeah, and fines. The fines are increasing. Like the board is trying to make an example because remember, the mandate of the board is to protect against unlawful evictions
Hmm.
and unlawful rent increases. So when a landlord takes such a position that I just want these tenants out, just serve them any notice, they resort to the N12 or the N13
Hmm.
and they think that they're safe. And all they do is they give it a paint job or they change the floors and they don't let the tenant come back or they don't follow the rules.
Right.
So the tenant will resort to either an illegal lockout application or a bad faith application.
Okay. So there's again an example. If you've got any questions about, is this actually legitimate renovation or not, talk to your paralegal about what they think and have them file the paperwork, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Remember, there's a test to, I mean, paralegals, the trained paralegals who do landlord and tenants, they know what the difference between a renovation is, an extensive renovation is, a construction or demolition,
Right. Okay.
right? You have to know the difference.
Right. Okay, so another one that we see quite a bit is I've got a family member moving in. Now, sometimes it's legitimate, but I've seen it very often where it's less so. How does this work for the legitimate people? And if it's illegitimate, what do we watch out for? Presumably the same thing as what we just talked about.
Well, the N12 notice is a little bit more easier for tenants to catch a landlord on bad faith. And I'll tell you, I had a landlord serve a N12 because his son was going to be moving in, and the tenant moved out. She didn't make a fuss. She moved out, and then she had a package, an Amazon package, be delivered to the address and it was picked up by the neighbor. The neighbor phoned her and said, "You come and pick up your package." Well, she went to pick up her package, Terry, and she got to talking with the neighbor, and the neighbor told her that nobody has moved in.
Mm.
So all you need is that nosy neighbor or that neighbor that watches everybody. Every street's got one, right?
Absolutely. Well, here, listen, I've got a question for you. Um, so our son is in starting second year at Queens. He just finished his final first year exam last night, so he's done. We got him into second year. Great. Now
Awesome.
let's pretend that. Hey, Jacob, good work. So let's pretend that my wife and I decided to buy a house for him and his roommates, and he's going to learn how to be a landlord. And we're closing on that in September because that's when he's going back to school. So there are people living there, tenants, and I say to him, look, my son's moving in, so skedaddle. My kid's moving in here. Then he decides he wants to go to Europe next year. So I bought the building. I got rid of the tenants in good faith. My kid was moving in there. He just decided to take a year off. What happens there?
Well, I mean, if he moves in, he's allowed to travel, okay? But he has to move in. So
Well,
if
he
he
doesn't move in. He intended to move in, but just
does,
changed his mind.
though, nothing flies with the board when it comes to intent.
Okay.
Changing his mind, none of that is going to fly with the board.
So if he changes his mind, he has air quote moved in. You can't turn around and go, okay, well, I guess I'll rent it to somebody else now.
No,
Do not
you
do that.
do
Even
not
if
do
you were
that.
acting in good faith.
That's correct. You have
Right.
to let the tenant know in writing that you can continue your tenancy.
Okay. So cash for keys, number one, significant construction. Talk to your paralegal. Talk to your paralegal about the cash for keys as well. We don't want to get
Absolutely
in trouble. And the family members moving in, talk to your paralegal as well. Keep your nose
correct.
clean and you should be fine, correct?
You got it. I
All
love
right.
that. Yes.
Anything else that you want to add?
No, that's it. That's it. I look forward to the next podcast.
Great. Thanks for joining. And again, everybody watching, if you've got any questions whatsoever, Beta's contact information is going to be in the description below. And as always, if you've got any real estate questions or need a hand buying, selling, I want to hear from you. Thank you very much for watching.